Today, Israel launches a fresh round of strikes into Lebanon as the widening war in the Middle East shows no signs of abating. The US president says the war in the Middle East could continue for several weeks, warning a bigger wave of attacks on Iran is yet to come. Iran targets energy infrastructure in the Gulf, including a key maritime passage, as global fuel prices begin to soar. Videos released of Bill and Hillary Clinton's closed-door testimonies about Jeffrey Epstein. And more heavy falls set to soak parts of North Queensland as a tropical low hovers over the Coral Sea. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Ros Childs. Israel has launched a fresh round of strikes into Lebanon as the widening war in the Middle East shows no signs of abating. And just in the last few minutes, we've received a statement from the US Defense Ministry saying their embassy in Riyadh has been hit by 2 drones. The Israeli military says it's targeting Hezbollah command centers and weapons storage facilities in the capital, Beirut. Hezbollah is backed by Iran. Israel's strikes come after Hezbollah fired rockets from Lebanon into northern Israel. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, earlier IDF strikes killed 52 people and left 150 wounded. The Lebanese government says it's banned Hezbollah from any further military activity and is demanding that those responsible for firing at Israel be brought to justice. Meanwhile, the US-led military campaign against Iran shows no sign of abating. The Iranian Red Crescent Society says at least 555 people have been killed since the strikes began on Saturday. US President Donald Trump says the campaign will likely take several more weeks and has defended the operation amid legal scrutiny, saying it was America's last best chance to strike. President Trump is also not ruling out US boots on the ground. Speaking for the first time since the military operation began, he's outlined his objectives.
First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis, and their capacity to produce brand new ones, and pretty good ones they make. Second, we're annihilating their Navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. They're at the bottom of the sea. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon, never going to have a nuclear weapon. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of their borders.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it's attacked another fuel tanker in the Hormuz Strait and has vowed to attack any ship trying to pass through the crucial trade passage. Qatar, one of the world's biggest exporters of LNG, has halted production, citing safety risks through the strait. And Saudi Arabia's Ras Tanura oil refinery has come under attack from 2 drones, although Iran has denied it was responsible. The refinery is one of the largest in the Middle East, with capacity to produce more than 500,000 barrels of crude oil a day. Overnight, heightened tension in the Gulf has led to a friendly fire incident. Kuwait, a US ally, shot down 3 US fighter jets. All 6 crew members ejected safely. Meanwhile, as the conflict continues to impact major travel hubs, the United Arab Emirates says it will begin operating special flights from Abu Dhabi and Dubai to allow stranded passengers to leave. At least 4,000 flights have been cancelled globally in the last 3 days, with thousands of Australians impacted. Former Middle East correspondent Ben Knight is with me in the studio now. Good to see you, Ben.
Hi, Ros.
So US President Donald Trump has laid out his objectives, but regime change isn't one of them. Now, what do you make of those comments?
It's changing. It's changing constantly. And even since Donald Trump made that speech where he outlined the 4 objectives as he saw them at that moment. We've since heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who has clarified it even further. So in the beginning, this was about regime change, and it was made very clear by both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. They both called upon, the Iranian people, this is your moment, this is your chance, your once-in-a-generation opportunity to rise up. We have your back. There's been absolutely no sign of that happening. There were celebrations when the news was broken that the Supreme Leader was killed, and that's a very dangerous thing to do in Iran, but it's a long way away from actually rising up and taking control. So the regime there is very, very clearly hanging on, to say the least. The army is still the army, the police are still the police. The Supreme Leader and a large number of senior members of the regime have been killed. But the transition is underway. Now, that's not to say that who knows how long that will last, but this idea that the people of Iran would do the job of Israel and the United States by staging a people's revolution, that hasn't happened. So we have seen the talk of regime change essentially disappear. It wasn't mentioned by Donald Trump, and it hasn't been mentioned by Marco Rubio. He only said, if that happens, that's great. The other thing that the main criteria for going into this, as stated at the beginning, was Iran's any nuclear weapons program of Iran. So that's now been bumped back down to one of those 4 criteria that Donald Trump mentioned. And as I say, since then, we've heard from Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio has said this is about the missile program, not the nuclear program, the missile program. He said that this is about stopping Iran from developing missiles and its drone program, which its nuclear program could hide behind. So it's constantly shifting. So
who's in charge in Iran right now?
Well, as we understand it, who is in charge is a group of 3 people. They are a transitional council. This is I think they're one of the heads of the military forces, the head of the Guardians Council, and the current president, whose name is Masoud Pezeshkian. He's regarded as a moderate, but a moderate in the context of the Iranian regime. So essentially, this is a continuation. They're very, very loyal to the regime, and they will essentially hold the fort while the process goes about of choosing a new Supreme Leader. Now, when will that happen? We don't know. And in fact, I've seen some analysis which I think pretty cleverly suggests that it wouldn't happen until after this conflict is over, because whoever is named as the new Supreme Leader would have a massive target on their back. So that process is underway. But as I say, look, the regime continues. And so that then raises those questions for the United States, particularly. What's the end game? You've said what the objectives are, but how do you know when they are achieved? How does this particularly end? And also because some of those objectives are pretty hard to prove. You can say, we want to stop the Iranian missile program. Well, there's no real way of determining if that's happened or not. The same thing with the nuclear program. I mean, it was back in June that that Donald Trump said it's been totally obliterated, and yet 8 months later, here we are apparently trying to knock it out again. So, it's that question of what next? What happens the day after? And particularly in this situation where you have a much more aggressive response by Iran than you saw 8 months ago, and it is spreading. It's spreading to neighbouring countries, and it's even threatening to bring in, European countries.
The US president says he's digging in for the long haul, 5-6 weeks, or for as long as it takes.
Well, yes. Well, that I think depends on how this is going, and particularly how this is received in the United States. So we don't know a lot yet about what Americans think about this. The only poll that we've seen was taken just before this conflict began, and it suggested that there was a pretty low level of support for United States intervention for very good reason. This is one of the things that Donald Trump campaigned on, not getting into foreign wars. Now, since then, you often, I think, see in the days after a military success like this. You see a bump in public support. You saw that with Venezuela. That ended very quickly, and that ended very successfully the United States, essentially because the Venezuelan government that was left behind after Nicolas Maduro was removed took a very pragmatic approach and said, we'll work with you. And so that's exactly what's happened. You're not going to get that with what's left of the Iranian regime. Much more ideological. And of course, the conflict with the United States has been going on essentially since the Islamic Revolution. There's a lot of history there, from the hostage crisis of 1979 and terror attacks. So I think you would not be surprised to see a bump in support in the United States because the rally behind the flag, popularity of a military success. But as it drags on, we already have 6 American soldiers who are dead. Donald Trump has warned that there will be more. That's going to really test, the public's willingness to tolerate this.
Ben Knight, thank you for your thoughts.
Thanks, Ros.
Well, Defence Minister Richard Marles has confirmed all Australians are safe and accounted for after a Middle East base used by the Australian Defence Force was hit by a drone strike over the weekend. For more, political reporter Romy Stevens joins us from Parliament House. Hi there, Romy. So what do we know about this strike?
Well, Ros, the Deputy Prime Minister has confirmed that the Al Minhad Air Base, which is located just outside of Dubai, was struck over the weekend. But he says that all Australians are safe and accounted for and that none were injured. Now, Australia has about 100 Defence Force personnel across the Middle East, and most of them are located in the United Arab Emirates, with this airbase, this particular airbase serving as an operational headquarters for many years now. Now, this is a joint facility that's managed by the UAE and it is not used by the United States. Now, the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles, he was asked earlier exactly where these drone strikes hit the facility, and he said that he wouldn't provide those details. Let's take a listen.
On the first night, there was a strike at the Al Minhad Air Base, but all the Australians who are there are safe and accounted for. There were no injuries to Australians.
Romy, what options are being considered to help get stranded Australians out of the Middle East?
Well, the Defence Minister, Richard Marles, says that there are a range of contingencies that are being worked through here. However, he wouldn't detail specific plans. The federal government estimates that there are around 115,000 Australians that are currently in the Middle East, and they have previously said that the quickest way to get those Australians out is via commercial flights rather than repatriation flights. So they're waiting to see whether or not those commercial flights might start up again. Now, it's understood that the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, when addressing the Labor caucus earlier, said that this time around is much more difficult because in the past, if the government has needed to get Australians out of that region, it has relied on some of those major transit hubs such as in Doha, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. But this time around, the airspace is closed around those hubs and they are impacted. So it's much more difficult this time around. The UAE is trying to put on some flights to help get those stranded Australians out of the region, but understandably it is very difficult at the moment given drone and missile strikes are hitting that region. And meanwhile, the Foreign Minister Penny Wong has also spoken to her UAE counterpart and thanked them for providing free accommodation and food to Australians that are stranded in the region.
And Romy, what's the political reaction been to public services being held to mourn Ayatollah Ali Khamenei?
Yeah, so there have been reports that some mosques and Islamic institutions are holding public memorial services and prayer sessions to mourn the former leader of Iran. Now, this has been criticised by both the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, and the Deputy Prime Minister, Richard Marles. And it's also been condemned by the opposition. And the opposition has also suggested that holding such events could potentially be a breach of law. So they're calling for these services to be investigated by authorities. Now, the Shadow Attorney General, Michaelia Cash, she spoke about this earlier and she said that it's utterly disgraceful that they are being held. Let's take a listen.
The IRGC is a listed terrorist organisation in Australia, and any suggestion that these sermons are in any way advocating support for the IRGC must be investigated. This is a country that does not tolerate terrorism, and we do not tolerate this type of behaviour.
Now, Ros, Parliament is sitting today and the government is under pressure to continue providing information to Australians that are stranded overseas and who are caught up in this conflict in the Middle East. So we can expect more questions to go their way as we head towards question time later today, and we'll bring the updates as they come.
OK, Romy, thank you. Oil and gas prices have risen sharply as the Iran conflict threatens to choke one of the world's most vital shipping routes. The Strait of Hormuz is the narrow waterway through which about a fifth of the world's oil flows. Iranian state media is reporting Iran's Revolutionary Guard has declared the strait closed and warned that Iran will fire on any ship trying to pass through. Commercial traffic in the region has already slowed dramatically since the US and Israel attacked Iran.
So there's uncertainty around the Strait of Hormuz. There's uncertainty around supply shocks in future. We've just seen Qatar saying that they're temporarily pausing some of their LNG production. Saudis also paused some of theirs, and some other countries in the region, including Israel, have also shut down some of their production capability. So it's all about uncertainty. And we're also hearing that some boats are struggling to get insurance to travel through the region at the moment, which means that they can't transport their goods, some of which is LNG.
Analysts say while Tehran's threat to completely block the strait is risky, cuts to supply from nearby Gulf countries are also causing significant disruption.
Other things that Iran is obviously can use and potentially might use is mining the Hormuz Strait. So therefore, apart from closing it to the international trade, but also mining it. So therefore, bringing the cost to the regional states, to the international actors. So this is also a possibility that Iran can utilize as all of them as part of this asymmetric warfare.
Let's bring in our finance reporter, Alicia Barry now. Hi, Alicia. So rising oil prices have sparked, of course, inflation worries globally. What's RBA Governor Michelle Bullock had to say about this and also the outlook for interest rates?
Yeah, she was asked about both of these things at a business summit today. And it's interesting because we're heading into this conflict where oil prices are rising, sparking the inflation worries, when we're already seeing elevated inflation in Australia. And she made that point, while short-term inflation expectations are anchored, if this conflict goes on for quite a while, then there is a risk that those longer-term inflation expectations could become unanchored. That is, expectations that inflation is going to rise start to increase, and that's when the RBA really has to act. So she says that a prolonged conflict in the Middle East could really impact global economic activity. She was asked about rate rises happening before we get the quarterly number ahead of the May meeting, and she said March is not ruled out. It is a possibility essentially because every meeting at the moment is live, and there's quite a bit more to weigh up now than there was just a few days ago. She says the conflict in the Middle East is something that the board is going to be watching really closely.
With a supply shock occurring in a situation where we already have high inflation, I think there is a risk that inflation expectations may start to move. So that will be something I think that will be front of mind for the board. Are we in a position where it's difficult to look through, particularly if it's an elongated shock? You mentioned some of the instances where it's quite easy to look through the shock, but this one might be a little bit harder because, as you say, we already have elevated inflation, and I think there is a risk that inflation expectations might become a little bit unanchored.
So how are the markets reacting?
Well, as energy prices rise, the energy sector on the Australian share market is on the way up too, but it's not enough to offset the losses that we're seeing elsewhere. And in fact, the Australian share market is falling deeper into the red. The All Ords and the ASX 200 index are currently down around 1% each, or just shy of that. If we take a look at those indices for you now, you'll see that the All Ords and the ASX 200 index are down around just over 0.9% each or so. So we can bring those up for you, or perhaps not at the moment. But we'll look at the top movers. And funds management firm Magellan Financial has been a standout today, unrelated to the Middle East crisis. It's actually issued new shares, about $130 million worth, in order to raise the funds to merge with Barrenjoey and the investment bank. The coal miners are doing particularly well in the energy sector. New Hope and Whitehaven Coal up sharply. Elsewhere, on the way down, we're seeing Pro Medicus and Neuron Pharmaceuticals. Qantas has extended losses for a second day. CEO Vanessa Hudson was speaking at the same business summit that Michelle Bullock was. She says the airline has pretty good fuel hedging in place, but that the spike in oil prices, given the conflict in the Middle East, was significant for the aviation industry. She says Qantas aircraft don't fly into Middle East airports, and it doesn't have any impacts to flights for now. Checking markets across the region, and the NZ50 is currently on the way down, as is the Nikkei in Japan. We'll get a read on those Chinese markets shortly. Now to the US. It was a fairly muted session on Wall Street as traders really tried to weigh up the potential market impact from the conflict in the Middle East, with oil prices spiking. The Dow off a few points, the S&P flat, the Nasdaq gaining a few. Checking commodity markets, and you can see there crude oil prices continue to climb. Brent crude now nearly at $79 a barrel, and safe haven buying has pushed up the gold price. We also saw that safe haven buying playing out on currency markets, with the US at least temporarily regaining its safe haven status, the US dollar rising against a basket of currencies, the Australian dollar managing to claw back some overnight losses against the greenback and now sitting at 71 US cents. Ros.
Thanks, Alicia. We have some breaking news out of Sydney for you. An armed man has been shot by police after two women were allegedly attacked at Potts Point. Police were called following reports an armed man had entered a unit complex and assaulted two women. Police say they first deployed a taser before officers shot the man. Multiple ambulances and a medical retrieval team are on the scene. Police have declared the shooting a critical incident. We'll bring you more during the course of the day. Now, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney has touched down in Sydney for a three-day visit to Australia. Mr Carney will hold business meetings in Sydney before heading to Canberra, where he'll deliver a major speech to the Australian Parliament. The two countries are likely to focus on expanding both strategic and economic ties in a time of enormous strategic disruption. But the escalating crisis in the Middle East is also likely to feature heavily in their talks. Foreign Affairs reporter Stephen Jedgetts joined us now. Stephen, so this was originally pitched as a visit focused heavily on trade and strategic ties, but of course events in Iran likely will now dominate these talks.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they'll entirely dominate talks, but there's no doubt that they will feature heavily. Both Australia and Canada are, of course, grappling with the full implications of the chaos that we're seeing in the Middle East right now with the US strikes on Iran. In many ways, there is a lot of common ground. Both countries have got large numbers of their nationals effectively stranded in the Middle East and are trying to work out how they can best get many of those people home. Similarly, neither Canada or Australia are major players, or really players at all in this conflict, but they have both, interestingly, given backing to the Trump administration's decision to strike Iran, notwithstanding big question marks over the legality of that decision. So I'd say, yes, there will be plenty of other things to discuss, but there's no doubt that the ever-evolving and rapidly escalating situation in the Middle East will also very firmly be on the agenda for the two leaders.
Stephen, what are going to be then the key priorities for Canada beyond discussions on the immediate crisis in the Middle East?
Look, Canada has pitched this trip as part of a broader attempt by Mark Carney to build ties with other middle powers. So it's not just Australia. He's also going to India. He's come from India, and he's going to Japan as well. So this is all part of Mark Carney's attempts to build these new formal and informal coalitions of middle powers in the face of increasingly aggressive and unpredictable behaviour by great powers, including most obviously the Trump administration. In Sydney, we expect him to have a pretty big focus on building investment links. Australia, like Canada, has got some big super funds. They've got a lot of capital sloshing around. Mark Carney has made it very clear he'd like to see super funds from other countries and investment funds across the world invest more heavily in Canada, particularly as it tries to build up its own economic resilience. In Canberra, it will be more politically focused, and it will be really interesting to see exactly what Mark Carney has to say when he addresses both the Lowy Institute in Sydney, but also when he addresses federal parliament in what will probably be a fairly high-profile event. We can talk about this a little bit more, but he's been talking a lot about the need to build a new order in the wake of these enormous strategic disruptions. So it'll be interesting to see exactly what he has to say.
Well, he created headlines earlier this year, didn't he, when he declared that rules-based order was over. So we are going to hear more about that during this visit.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see how hard Mark Carney leans into this theme when he speaks to Parliament. Of course, Canada, more so than Australia, has felt the sharp edge of the new approach that the US administration is taking. We've seen some very, very overt threats from Donald Trump towards Canada. We've seen tariffs whacked on Canada. We've seen, in many ways, that relationship go into a nosedive. In the wake of that, we saw this pretty famous speech from Carney at Davos, where he basically said, the world order is, as we knew it, is over. It was a bit of a fiction in the first place, perhaps, but now it's done. And it's up for countries like Canada to build new formal and informal alliances in order to push ahead with key priorities and to try and stabilise the world in the face of this rupture. Now, of course, Australia agrees with much of this, but it's taken a much less sharply critical approach towards the United States for many very large and obvious reasons. So it'll be interesting to see whether Mark Carney leans into direct criticism of the US while he's here or speaks a little bit more gently, which gives Australia, of course, a little bit more room for manoeuvre.
Stephen, thank you. Around 9 hours of video has been released of former US President Bill Clinton and his wife Hillary giving evidence to a congressional committee investigating Jeffrey Epstein. The pair sat through separate closed-door hearings last week. Ms McKay has been trawling through the tapes this morning and joins me now in the studio. Hi, Melissa. So there are about 9 hours of videotapes to go through. What have you been able to glean so far from former President Bill Clinton's testimony?
Well, Ros, I've made it about halfway through former President Bill Clinton's testimony, which is about 4.5 hours long. Each of these clips that have been released are several hours long. We heard a very broad opening statement from the former president at the beginning of this closed-door hearing. He talked about being there and probably not being able to offer a lot of detail. He said that he is appearing before the committee because the girls and women whose lives Jeffrey Epstein destroyed deserve not only justice but healing. He said that though through his brief acquaintance with Jeffrey Epstein, he said that relationship ended years before his crimes came to light, and that he never witnessed during any of their interactions any indication of what was truly going on. We know that these crimes that Jeffrey Epstein committed really came to light in about 2008. Bill Clinton says that his relationship ended with Jeffrey Epstein long before that. He also went on to talk about his wife, Hillary Clinton, who was also questioned, saying that she had never met him. He was asked about pictures. Obviously, we've seen over the last couple of weeks, as these Epstein files have been released, pictures of Bill Clinton at Jeffrey Epstein's house. He admitted to having travelled on his planes, but maintains that he really had no idea what was going on and really tried to distance himself from Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I think we can take a quick listen to some of what he had to say.
I think in 2008, when he was prosecuted. There's nothing that I saw when I was around him that made me realize he was trafficking women, and I never.
Hillary Clinton, of course, has also given evidence, as you said, Mel. What did she have to say?
Yeah, her evidence went for a similar amount of time, about 4.5 hours. That tape, I've also managed to get through about half of it so far. There is still quite a lot to go through, but so far what I can see from the former Secretary of State is a very similar approach to sort of distancing herself from Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, Hillary Clinton maintains that she doesn't ever recall meeting Jeffrey Epstein himself. She says that in preparation for her testimony that she was told that he had appeared at a White House event that she was at, and that she may have been in the same room as him at that time, but that she has no memory of ever meeting him. She accepts that Ghislaine Maxwell was at her daughter's wedding, that she was dating someone who was invited to the wedding, and so she says that in that context Ghislaine Maxwell was a +1 to her daughter's wedding, but that she only knew Ghislaine Maxwell very casually. She was very critical of successive governments and authorities over the years for no one picking up on Jeffrey Epstein's crimes earlier than that 2008 when he was arrested and charged in 2008. She was also asked about, as I mentioned, those pictures of her husband with Jeffrey Epstein, and she really refused to comment on any feelings that she might have had about those pictures. She was asked specifically, well, after Jeffrey Epstein's crimes came to light, did you not look at those pictures in any sort of different light? And she says that she had no context for what was going on when those pictures were taken, and so she wasn't going to offer any commentary about it. There have been a few tense moments so far in the first sort of 2.5 hours of her testimony. She's snapped about a picture that was released by someone inside the room during that testimony. These videos are being released, you know, several days after this deposition took place. Hillary Clinton said that she made it quite clear she wanted it to be live streamed, she wanted it to be open to the public, but it wasn't. And then we can take a listen to the moment that it became clear that someone inside the room had taken a picture of her giving evidence and released it.
She is testifying. Can you please explain how that
I'm done with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So I would like to understand how that's permissible.
Before the hearing was...
It doesn't matter. We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah,
So
well...
I would like to take a break at this moment.
Yeah,
I'd like to have
I'm
a conversation.
done for now.
Go off the record. Go off the record.
So a few tense moments like that over the few hours, Ros, but there are still several hours of these tapes to filter through. We haven't yet seen any sign of the transcripts that we were promised, so this is a bit of a very manual task.
Okay, Mel, thank you for the update. New data from more than 10,000 workplaces shows that while the gender pay gap is narrowing overall, industries with the highest pay often have the largest discrepancy, with men twice as likely to be in top earning positions. Joining us now is the ABC business reporter, Daniel Ziffer. So, Dan, what is the main driver for this narrowing of the gap? Let's start with the good news.
Well, the good news is it is getting smaller. So the gap, the gender pay gap, is 11.2%. Now, this is the average of total remuneration, so all the kind of overtime and bonuses, and that's the midpoint. So most businesses, the middle of them, are 11.2, so half are better, half are worse. What that means is that on average, Australian women are making 88 cents for every $1 that men make, but it has come down 0.9 percentage points in the past year. So we're heading in the right direction in this national data that covers 5.9 million women and men.
And what's the government had to say about this latest report?
The government's very happy with this current trend. We just heard from Minister for Finance, Katie Gallagher, discussing the result.
When I look at the report and when I first read the report, it shows progress and movements in the right direction. I think there'd probably be plenty of views that it's not happening fast enough, but we are seeing consistent change in the right direction with the publication of each one of these reports, and I think the publication of this data is making a very much a practical difference to that result.
Katie Gallagher, Minister for Finance, discussing the result there. So we're seeing a positive trend. This is a really amazing set of data. It's available on the ABC website. You can look and see what the gap is at your employer, at your old employer, at your next employer. So it does provide a lot of transparency for Australian workers about what people are paid overall and then the gender gap within companies.
And where are the sectors that we could see further quick improvement moving forward, Dan?
So we actually have in Australia insanely gender segregated industries. So more than half of people, 53%, work in an industry that's dominated by either men or women. Now, we've seen some substantial changes which are flowing through in male-dominated occupations such as construction. So in those sectors, we're successfully getting more women into them. These are better paid sectors. These are sectors that have access to overtime and bonuses. So we're seeing that gender gap narrowing. Where we're not seeing is as much movement in feminised industries such as aged care and nursing and teaching, things like this. We're not getting as many men in there. As Mary Wooldridge, the CEO of the agency that gets this data together, makes the point, when you're only recruiting from half of the population, you're not going to be able to meet the future care needs of Australia. So some really interesting data and some things to think about for corporate Australia.
Thanks, Daniel. To North Queensland now, where major flooding combined with the chance of a cyclone later this week has communities on alert. Our reporter Chloe Shemicki is in Townsville. Chloe, some communities there have received 300 millimetres of rain since Saturday. Must be a massive impact to that.
Well, good afternoon, Ros. So we've already seen the all-important Bruce Highway cut between Cairns and Townsville just north of Ingham yesterday morning during that major flooding. Thankfully, that important road has reopened just recently to one lane of traffic. However, it meant that truckies and travellers were stranded for the evening in the sugarcane district of the Hinchinbrook Shire, spending the night in Ingham as the Herbert River there was in a major flood. And throughout that area, we saw roads cut by floodwaters, bridges as well, and plenty of surface water around. So this morning, council crews have been out testing the safety of those roadways as water drains away. Thankfully, we have had some reprieve in the very heavy rainfall you mentioned, Ros, in that area, but the Hinchinbrook Shire Council says it's going to require about 2 to 3 days for all of that surface water to drain away. And there's a warning out at the moment for the Cape York Peninsula and the whole North Tropical Coast, a flood watch warning, because any further heavy rainfall at the moment would result in rapid river rises, and we have a monsoonal trough sitting over the Gulf of Carpentaria.
And there's the chance of this cyclone as well, Chloe.
Exactly. We're all watching a tropical low in the northern Coral Sea. It's 29U. The Bureau of Meteorology expects that during the week it's going to take a westward track towards the Queensland coast. And from Thursday, there is a 25% chance, or a moderate chance, that it will intensify into a tropical cyclone, either on Thursday or Friday. However, the Bureau says later this afternoon that chance could increase. So we'll be watching their updates on this system most definitely. But what is very uncertain is where this system could potentially impact. The Weather Bureau is looking at communities all the way in the far north from Cooktown down to the Mackay and Whitsunday region. And of course, in the middle of those two areas is where we saw that major flooding cutting the Bruce Highway yesterday. So communities just hoping they get some reprieve from heavy rain, allowing that water to drain, and most certainly making preparations now for a potential cyclone, Roz.
Chloe, thank you. This is ABC News, our top stories. Israel has launched a fresh wave of strikes on Lebanon's capital, Beirut, targeting Hezbollah command centres. The Lebanese government has urged the Iran-backed military group to disarm and cease military action against Israel. Hezbollah and Israeli forces began exchanging fire yesterday after US-led strikes on Iran killed the Iranian supreme leader. Iran's Revolutionary Guard commander says the Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed, saying it'll set any ship trying to pass on fire. The strait is the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean, through which 20% of the world's oil and gas is shipped. Its closure would choke a fifth of global oil flows and send crude prices soaring. Lengthy videos of Bill and Hillary Clinton's landmark depositions about late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein have been made public. The pair have repeatedly denied having any knowledge or involvement with Epstein's crimes. Former president and former Secretary of State each face more than 4 hours of questioning from both Democratic and Republican politicians. And large parts of Queensland are on flood watch as a tropical low lingers in the Coral Sea. A monsoonal trough over the Cape York Peninsula has been driving more wet weather over saturated North Queensland catchments. The system has a moderate chance of reaching cyclone strength this week. Let's get more now on the legality of US and Israeli strikes on Iran. Donald Trump has used the dismantling of Iran's military and nuclear capabilities as one justification, while Israel claims the attacks are a preemptive move against the regime. Ben Saul is Professor of International Law at Sydney University and a United Nations Special Rapporteur. Ben Saul, welcome to you.
Good to be with you.
Are these strikes on Iran legal under international law?
It's crystal clear that these are illegal armed attacks on Iran by the US and Israel. They amount to the international crime of aggression. The UN Charter bans the use of force against other countries unless you've been attacked or you're about to be attacked. And of course, Iran is not attacking anybody. It doesn't even have a nuclear weapon, and there's certainly no order to use a nuclear weapon against anybody. So this is one of the clearest violations of the most fundamental rule of the post-World War order since 1945, which is not to aggressively attack other countries.
So the justifications that have been put forward by the US and Israel, essentially that these are preemptive strikes, they don't have any legal basis.
That's right. If an armed attack is imminent, then self-defense could be legal. But that means an attack must be about to happen. And of course, Iran's still at the point of enriching nuclear material. It hasn't even made the decision to actually build a nuclear weapon, let alone make one and then threaten to use it against anybody. We live in a world where lots of countries have adversaries with powerful weapons they don't like. It doesn't mean it gives you any justification for preemptively attacking other countries, killing lots of innocent people in the process, and making the world a lot less safe along the way.
So we've heard from Pete Hegseth, the now US Secretary of War, responding to challenges that the US action was taken outside international rules. Let's hear what he had to say.
America, regardless of what so-called international institutions say, is unleashing the most lethal and precise air power campaign in history. B-2s, fighters, drones, missiles, and of course, classified effects. All on our terms, with maximum authorities. No stupid rules of engagement, no nation-building quagmire, no democracy-building exercise, no politically correct wars. We fight to win, and we don't waste time or lives.
Pete Hegseth, clearly they're saying that the US is doing what it wants, when it wants. Is there any legal framework to censure the US for its action? And if there is, how effective would that be?
So certainly it's incredibly difficult to enforce international law against superpowers who act in this kind of lawless, aggressive way. Unfortunately, the United States has a veto power on the one institution that could do something, the United Nations Security Council, and the US has wielded that veto many, many times before to prevent the enforcement of international law against itself and against its allies like Israel. Of course, what other countries need to do is step up and protest as loudly as they can this lawlessness, to kind of raise the political price on the United States and Israel so that they think twice about doing this again. There's a real role for middle powers here like Australia and Canada and the UK and the Europeans who should be the ones standing up for international law and opposing this kind of lawlessness and imposing a price for these kinds of violations.
So with the US acting in this way then and making the statements it's made, what precedent does this set for the global rule-based order? What does the future hold?
It's certainly tough times for international law. Of course, we've been here before. The US invaded Iraq in 2003. That was illegal. Australia supported the United States illegally back then as well. International law is pretty resilient. It's been around about 500 years. It'll certainly outlive Donald Trump's presidency, which just has a couple of years to go. But it does mean all countries who genuinely care for a rules-based international order, which Australia says it supports, really need to stand up and protest this kind of lawlessness. It's not just about breaking international law. This also makes the whole world less safe. Depending upon Donald Trump and his whims to somehow maintain international peace and security is the worst possible strategy. International law provides a framework for balancing national security interests and ensuring global security and the protection of human rights.
Ben Saul, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Iran's Revolutionary Guard says it will fire on any ship trying to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC has emphasised that the shipping route is closed and has warned it'll set vessels on fire if necessary. The strait is the world's most vital oil export route. Here with implications for oil and petrol prices is Associate Professor Sanjoy Paul from the University of Technology in Sydney. Hi there, Sanjoy. So what is the situation, first of all? There seems to be some confusion about whether the strait has been shut or not.
Yes, so if you see that the strait has not been officially declared to be closed. So what happened? They are attacking ships. So many companies, major companies like Maersk, Hapag-Lloyd, so they suspended their shipment through the channel. And it is disrupting our energy needs. So because 20% of our global energy needs transit through this channel. So that's why this channel plays a critical role for fulfilling our energy need every day. However, disruption, I would say it's a disruption because they are attacking and all companies suspended their shipments. So it's creating a major disruption for our global energy needs, and potentially it could disrupt our energy needs in Australia as well.
Australia doesn't get much oil from that part of the world, though, does it?
I would say it's not actually true because we directly import 15% of our crude oil from Middle Eastern countries and 5% of our petroleum products. However, our refined oil, 30% of our refined oil we import from Asian countries, including South Korea and Singapore. But our suppliers, they import crude oil from Middle Eastern countries. So if our suppliers impacted by this disruption, I would say it will have a flow-on effect on our supply here in Australia.
So what's this going to do to prices, Sanjoy?
We have already seen 10 to 15% increase in prices. So we can't predict how high it would go, but longer the disruption, I would expect the price would be a lot more higher. So yes, so we have seen before that energy price always increase with global tensions and wars. So yeah, so there is no exact prediction. However, it would go higher as the disruption continue for a longer time.
Well, with the disruption in supplies, how long could it take to get things back on an even keel once the threat against transportation through the strait is lifted?
Oh, it depends on how companies are responding and what is their recovery plan. So they need to make those, recovery plan ready. So usually it could take from weeks to months. So even the war or disruption stop now, it will take a longer time, including 15 to 30 days to normalize the operations, and to return to full capacities, it could take longer.
Sandra Paul, thank you.
Thank you.
They are one of the natural wonders of the world, but the snow-capped mountains in the Swiss Alps are under threat. They're warming at twice the global average, with dozens of towns already damaged and one destroyed in catastrophic landslides. On tonight's Foreign Correspondent, reporter Naomi Selvaratan travels to see the problem firsthand.
The village of Blotten once stood here for more than 800 years. It took just seconds to wipe it out. In May last year, about 20 million tonnes of rock, ice and mud broke free when the glacier collapsed, tearing through the valley and burying everything in its path. One person died that day. 300 residents lost their homes. Farmer Danny Rittler was in the valley when it happened.
Der rechten Seite ist die Lawine angekommen und ist links 200 Höhenmeter hochgegangen. Hinter dem Schulhaus, das man hier sieht in Weiler, hinter dran, ist dies daheim gewesen, aber das ist nur mehr Schuttkegel inzwischen.
Danny's house, his sheep farm and his business now lie buried under millions of tons of rock.
Ja, es ist fremd. Es fühlt sich fremd an. Nicht real, einfach wie ein Traum. Oder ich kann es gar nicht definieren, wie es vorher ausgesehen.
There are plans to rebuild Blotten, but not everyone wants to return.
Ja, es gibt immer wieder Veranstaltungen, wo sich die Leute treffen. Und man merkt euch, dass es Leute gibt, die in die Zukunft sehen, die in die Zukunft gehen. Und dann gibt es Leute, die die Zukunft in Plateau sehen. Und nachher gibt es Leute, was nicht so gut geht, die zerbrechen fast an der ganzen Situation.
And you can watch the full episode of Foreign Correspondent tonight at 8 on ABC TV and on ABC iView. Now for sport, here's Daniela Intili. Hi, Danny. Let's start with NRL. Zach Lomax has settled his legal fight with Parramatta.
It has been a lengthy legal battle indeed, Ros, and he has agreed with Parramatta that he won't return to the NRL before the 2028 season. So this is an out-of-court settlement with the Eels. After what's been a lengthy dispute, the New South Wales Supreme Court has been told that the terms of his release stay the same, but that he'll now be able to return without the Eels' consent in 2028 instead of 2029. He had been trying to sign with the Melbourne Storm to play in the NRL's opening match, which would have been with Parramatta. The Storm will now have to pay the Eels' legal cost in $250,000. And Lomax, but Parra says it's still open to Lomax negotiating with another NRL club, but in exchange for what would be the right price. And Lomax had initially exited the Eels to start the Rebel Rugby 360 competition, but because that's in limbo, he is now in limbo until 2028.
Onto the AFL, and a milestone match awaits a Hawk star.
Yeah, Hawthorn defender Josh Battle will play his 150th match when the Hawks take on the Giants in the opening round in Sydney this week. But for the Hawks, they will be sweating on some other issues with the co-captain Giant Newcombe. He's headed to the tribunal tonight in a bid to play in the opening round. He's going to be challenging the one-match ban for rough conduct on the Western Bulldogs midfielder Ed Richards in a pre-season game last Friday. But for the meantime, his battle talking about his 150th match.
Yeah, it's obviously 150, so it's gone pretty fast. Kind of blink and now you're here. So obviously spent eight seasons at the Saints and then first year last year at the Hawks, and yeah, loving my time here. So yeah, hopefully we can get the win against GWS.
Danny, the Matildas have been knocked off top spot in their group in the Women's Asian Cup.
Yeah, it follows South Korea's very clinical 3-0 win against Iran in what is their opening match. When the national anthem was played, neither the players or the coach seemed to sing or respond to it. And clearly during the game, it was the South Koreans who dominated, winning 3-0. So going on top of Group A on goal difference against Australia, who beat the Philippines 1-0 the other day. And Australia will take on Iran on the Gold Coast for their next Asian Cup match on Thursday.
And the Australian women's cricket has arrived in Perth.
Yes, the team has arrived in Perth after their ODI win in Hobart. It was a very clinical win there, and they're looking to seal the multi-format series, which they're already leading 8-4. They won by 185 runs. Elisa Healy, of course, she came off a record-breaking 158. It's her final appearance before retiring. Beth Mooney will take on the wicket-keeping gloves full-time. And she spoke a little bit about that sentiment and about Elise Healy.
Yeah, I think so. I think just with the way the squads are shaping up, Midge hasn't done a whole lot of keeping since Big Bash, so it's looking like I'll probably take the gloves, but maybe I'll throw them to her at the back end of the last session and let her finish like that. I think the conditions at the WACA will suit us really nicely. Obviously, we've got the pace and bounce of Darcy Brown, maybe a debutant in Lucy Hamilton, who's in the squad as well, and a couple of new faces too.
And what's the latest from Australian Formula One, Danny?
Well, the officials say that all required personnel are expected to arrive in the next day or so. Of course, we've got all those tensions in the Middle East. There was concerns about that. But F1 practice due to start on Friday ahead of the official race. And in some lovely news, Ferrari star Charles Leclerc, he married his influencer partner Alexandra Sonmöller ahead of the F1 season. A civil wedding took place and they drove off in this 1957 Ferrari 250 Testarossa, valued at around 17 million Australian dollars.
Wow, I hope he kept the speed limit. Time to check the weather now. Here's Nate Byrne.
A low-pressure system that's been bothering the interior of Australia all last week is now on its last legs, still bringing some heavy falls to parts of New South Wales. Warnings associated with that are likely to come off later on today as that low finally gets torn apart, although it'll leave some of the moisture behind, extending back up along a trough into parts of Queensland where we've got major flooding going on in the southwest of the state. We've got an active monsoon trough right now and then another trough over in the west that's helping to gather a lot of heat. That's causing high fire danger for a big chunk of WA. In terms of rainfall today, we will still see some heavy falls around that low. As we get towards the end of the day, they should start to back off, but extends back up to the tropics where there is plenty of rain on the way. That active monsoon trough is ready to kick up. Plenty of tropical lows for the week ahead. We're talking about 4 potential systems that could undergo some intensification. Keep an eye on this one bothering the top end, and then this one that could start to move south through Queensland. Now, it's a little bit far out to know exactly where it's going to move and how intense it's going to get. There's a moderate chance we could be talking about a cyclone, but in both cases we're talking about the potential for hundreds of millimetres of rain for parts of the territory and parts of Queensland as well. Plenty to keep an eye on the week ahead, but I'm also just watching tomorrow. We're looking at a possible shower for Brisbane. You're aiming for 30 degrees, 29 for Sydney, some showers around again for you, and there'll be a couple of falls for Canberra as well, 29 there. In Melbourne, it should stay dry but cloudy, 21. Hobart's warming up a touch, 24 your top, 27 in Adelaide, 37 in the west for Perth. And then up top Darwin, no big change for you. Showers and maybe an afternoon storm, you'll get to 31.
That's it for now. I'm Ros Childs. See you soon.